How would you like to start? Shall we start with Allan McCoist's pay settlement?
You can if you like, yes.
Has it been agreed?
Yes, it has been agreed with immediate effect.
Is that a relief to all concerned?
I think it's nice to to have it behind us in the sense that there seemed to be an issue that I think I said repeatedly, shouldn't really be an issue. I think our view has always been that Rangers Football Club had a contract in place with Allan McCoist. Ali, I think very generously, previously worked for free at a difficult time for the club. He then worked for half price at a difficult time for the club. He then moved on and he had every right to enforce his contract. It was obviously developing as an issue, and I reached out to Ali on my last trip in Scotland at the end of July and said, Ali, look, shouldn't we sitting down and seeing if we can't do something here? He was very receptive, very open to that. Chatted to me. We chatted a little bit about some issues that I wasn't aware of in terms of the labour law. So if there was an agreement, it's got to be done within certain parameters with labour legislation if you're terminating a contract. So I said, Ali, that's fine. Go and find out all of the things you need to know. Let's figure it out. Let's stay in touch. And when I'm back again on this trip, let's get together and see if we can reach agreement. And we met yesterday and reached agreement in about 4 or 5 minutes. So, we're delighted, and we're delighted that Ali's been generous enough to agree to the termination of the contract and commercial terms that are favourable to the club.
Did Ali come back to you? I know you said you met him, but presumably he's now got another job to go to. Did you speak to him about that?
I don't know if he's got another job to go to. I'd heard there is a possibility of that, but Mario focus wasn't the Rangers situation, that there was a balance of the contract. Could we do something that worked for the football club? That recognised, I think, the service Ali has given the club over the years. I mean, Ali's he's a hero. He's a Rangers hero, all-time greatest goal scorer, and we look forward to kind of having him and his mum, who I think is missing the games, back in the director's box. It's where he belongs. So I'm very pleased that it's been resolved now.
Do you ever see a future role for him at the club?
I think right now, we've had a kind of change in a number of things at the club, and I think right now the focus, certainly for the next 2.5 years, I think they're still progressing with the plan that we can announce previously in terms of what we're trying to do with the club going forward. So I think the road and the path we're on at the moment, I think, is the one that we're going to continue with.
You said last time you were here that you would spend whatever it takes to get Rangers promoted.
Yes.
I think so far, in terms of transfer fees, it's about £700,000 it's been sent. Is that you believe is going to be enough, given the start the team's made?
If you ask me, do I believe it's going to be enough? My view is that the team, and the way it's performed so far, I think that Mark and Davy, in terms of the players they brought in, we've been quite, I hesitate to use the word fortunate, because I'm sure that they will argue that there's a level of skill and application in bringing the right players in, but it certainly is very unusual to bring in the number of players that they've brought in and find out that virtually all of them are performing and adding value to the club without missing a beat at all. So my personal view, and Mark might disagree, is I think that the team that we've got in place at the moment will see us off in the league, which was the promise I made. We will win the league this year. And what I've indicated to Mark over the last couple of days is that we can do business in the January transfer window. Hopefully that business should not be necessary to win the league this year, but it should be done with a mind to challenging next year for the Scottish Premier League title. Our ambition is to start next season competing for the title and then be in Europe the following year. So already, we're directing our attention to doing business that is preparatory, I think, for our campaign next season.
Do you have an idea about
on the budget for that?
There's still no figure. As I've said previously, if all of these players hadn't worked that well, and we got to December and we were, say, 3 points behind in the league, we'd have spent more money to make sure we win the league this season, and possibly not worried as much about the following season. The mandate for Mark remains is to win the league this season. We will spend what is necessary, and we do recognise we will have to substantially invest in the squad to compete.
You say
next year in the Premier League.
To do what's necessary. You must have some figure somewhere.
We don't. I've been asked this question 40 times probably, and the answer is still the same. Mark will get what he needs to compete.
Does that surpass your own expectations, Dave? Had you anticipated needing to have spent more by this point?
I think the level of money that we've spent at the early stage is probably more or less in line with what I thought. You know, there was a possibility of the Scott Allan transfer, which would have, you know, he would have come in if that had gone through, which would have increased it to that extent. But certainly I was anticipating a possible need to top it up again in January through perhaps necessity. And I think we're probably going to have more flexibility in the January transfer windows to whether to do business in January if it's available to us, or whether to keep our ammunition, so to speak, back for the transfer window at the end of the season. But that'll be Mark's choice, whether he thinks he can bring in a player that will help him this season, but more importantly, give him half a season to prepare him early for next season. So we're giving Mark that level of flexibility in determining what he wants to do, and he will be the one that tells us what money he wants to spend.
You've had a bit of success in the loan market already. Does that change at all with a view to going into the Premier League, the assumption being that those players won't be there next season?
I think our view long term would be that for Rangers going forward, we think having access to a loan market is a permanent part of the solution is probably a good idea. If we are able to offer a style of football that's attractive to some of the English Premier League clubs, where they're willing to give us some players on loan, then we think that can be, you know, a permanent arrangement and a very useful arrangement for the club. Individual players may come and go, but we'd like to think if we look after the players, there is no doubt to get a young player, say, coming up from Arsenal, like it's the opportunity. And someone sat next to his father and he said the experience was unbelievable to come and play at Ibrox and 50,000. They really didn't kind of recognise they were getting that experience. And if clubs like Arsenal and Spurs believe we're looking after the players and we're playing the type of football they think will advance their careers, then we would like to think that option will be continued to be available to us long term, because it makes business sense to have that option available if we can keep it.
Is it your view? You said that if we're going to be making any signs in January, it'll be with a view to competing with Celtic next season. Is it your view that the squad as it stands isn't yet strong enough to compete with Celtic next year?
Yes. I think that this is my personal view. I think Mark could answer the question better than me, but my view would be that the squad that we have at the moment would be more competitive in the Premier League, was it playing in the Premier League, than we'd have anticipated at this early stage. I think it goes to the quality, I think, of what has been brought in. But do I think that what we've got at the moment would compete in the Premier League? No. I would imagine we'd need, again, Mark will answer it better, I would say we'd probably need another 5 additions to the existing squad before we'd be, I'd say a minimum of 5.
You say compete, you mean compete to win?
We would start next season with the intention of winning the Premiership. We understand the gap against Celtic, but the ambition is not to come second. The ambition would go in to try to win the league, in believing we had a chance of winning the league.
You're speaking like a man who thinks the league's already won. Do you think it's already won, the championship?
No, I'm expressing a comfort level. I think that the team that Rangers is clearly not won. I mean, that's obvious. It's obviously not won. But if one looks at the quality we've got and we look at the way they were playing, then one can't take it for granted. But I would be extremely surprised if Rangers didn't win the league.
Have you been surprised with the way that Mark has sort of settled into the job and the way that the sort of players have adapted to his style of play so quickly?
Yes. Yeah, I think that a couple of things. I think that there seems to be an uplift in the squad. Some of the players last year seem to be playing at a high level. And I think that's partly the atmosphere around the club. You know, if you look at the circumstances last season where there was a lot of doom and gloom around the team, they weren't performing. And from the board's point of view, going back to the football management team, they were told there'd be more cutbacks. So there was a kind of negative scenario all the way around. And I think that, you know, a lot of players have lifted their game. So, you know, there is no doubt that we're far further down the road in terms of, you know, the quality of the football. And I think, you know, Mark has been fantastic because to some extent it's been his eye. You know, he's really come in at fairly short notice without the level of preparation that he'll have now for next season, and had to put that squad together quite quickly with what was available. And I think the results speak for themselves.
What sort of level of dialogue have you had with him? Because I think you said when you came in, you hadn't really even had a chance to speak to yourself. You'd sort of dealt with Paul more than anything else.
Well, initially, you know, I'd met Mark obviously when we appointed him, and then this trip now is the first time I've really sat down one-on-one with him. But during the course of the transfer window, obviously I've had discussions with the football executive as to what players we're bringing in and how they fit in and how we see the club going forward. So there has been, quite a lot of interaction with them up until the end of the transfer window.
Dave, what's the latest with talks with Sports Direct?
The latest with talks with Sports Direct is I've still got the gagging order, which prevents me from telling you what the latest is in the talks with Sports Direct.
Do you foresee any movement then in the months to come?
I've got a gagging order.
You mentioned this trip. What else are you hoping to achieve in this trip? What's the general purpose of you being over at this point in time?
Well, the general purpose of this trip was to have a board meeting. We have to have regular board meetings to review the performance of the club to date. There's a lot of issues, appointment of commercial people. So there's been a lot going on behind the scenes. I think that, from the board's point of view, we're very grateful that from the media perspective, at least the footballing activities seem to be dominating the headlines. But there are issues, obviously, we're still dealing with as a board. There's the restructuring, there's the new executive team that is now in place, complete with the appointment of the senior commercial managers. So there's still a lot of business behind the scenes that we have to deal with.
Yes, you seem to be ahead of schedule on the pitch. What about off the pitch? How would you generally describe the current financial state of Rangers and why do you think it is the way it is?
I would say we're ahead off the pitch as well. I think we've managed to do the business we had to do, which was important. I think we've got the executive in place. We've managed to get the auditors in place, which was quite important, to get the general meeting completed before the end of the year, or in my case before the end of November, because I don't want to break my summer holidays and come back to Scotland in December if I can stay in the warm climates down there. And the board has settled down very, very well. You've gone from this transitional board, you had that interim period where there was uncertainty around my status in terms of the fit and proper. So, really we've got a lot behind us now, where we're just getting on with business off the park, and I think, as we can clearly see, the team's getting on with business on the park.
Do you need further investment this season, and if so, where do you see that coming from?
It would depend on the level of business we do in January. At the moment, we're comfortable. We're well funded through to the end of the season. We're financially ahead of where we are, or where we thought we would be at this point in time, because the season ticket sales have gone reasonably well. We've got some full attendances even with season tickets weren't whole. So financially we're ahead of the expectations from the normal operating performance, which means the requirements on the shelves is maybe slightly less than we thought it might be this year. But again, that will depend on the level of business that Mark feels is available to him to do in the January transfer window, in terms of whether there's quality signings that he thinks can add value for the next couple of years.
You mentioned Scott Allan, the transfer bid for him. Hibs were quite critical of the way that Rangers had sort of operated during that whole period. How did you see the way that the club's pursuit had gone?
Yeah, where I viewed it differently from Hibs was that the initial approach really had come from Hibs, where they said, we know you're interested. If you do want to do business with Scott Allan, let's do it quite quickly so we know where we stand. And we proceeded to do it quite quickly. And we were therefore surprised when Hibs' official response was, we will not sell to Rangers under any circumstances whatsoever. We initially took that as a negotiating position to increase the price, and it was only after another couple of rounds of negotiations we understood they were really serious. No matter what we did, they were not going to sell to us. And therefore I'm very, very grateful to Celtic for taking him away from Hibs. So at least they did us a favour rather than leaving him behind.
So you're saying Hibs initiated the initial contact?
The initial one was a discussion with Hibs saying, look, we've heard you're interested in Scott Allan, and I think Paul Murray had made a statement to that effect to the media, and I think you guys had run with it. If you are interested, please come in and do the business early so we know where we stand in terms of replacing him. And we thought, well, okay, that's the invitation that we acted on, and it didn't turn out that way. Clearly, at a later stage, someone within Hibs made a decision, and I understand the decision. I think from Rangers' point of view, we wouldn't have been selling our top player to Hibs either. So I got why Hibs took the position they did. But unfortunately, that was not the position that was communicated to us right up front. So as far as I'm concerned, Rangers Football Club acted perfectly correctly in all aspects, and we've put it behind us. I've had a change of correspondence with them, and I think we're both happy that there's no issue to be carried forward there.
Can you just clarify that, Dave? Are you saying it was an official from Hibs? It wasn't a third party, as in another agent, that approached Rangers? Someone officially from Hibs came to Rangers?
They didn't come to Rangers. In a conversation, the issue of Rangers' interest came up. And it was said to us, listen, if you are interested, please move quickly. That was reported back to me through the normal executive channels within Rangers. And I said, well, okay, let's engage with the club and see what we can do. And then I repeat, when the club came back the first time, I took it as a price negotiation strategy, not realising they were serious about not selling to Rangers, and it turned out they were serious about not selling to Rangers.
So what did you think when you read the statement saying we'll effectively sell to anyone but Rangers?
I accepted that. I accepted that as probably being the commercial reality, and the Scott Allan addition for us at that point in time in any event was out with what we were looking to do. So if we'd have brought Scott Allan in, it again had been part of the plan for next season. I think the feeling at that point in time was we'd done the business we wanted to do. We were okay to start this season and reassess it later. So Scott was another example of us saying to Mark, if the player is available, whether you need him, in your view, to compete this season or not, we're willing to look at him in advance of where we want to be next year and the year after.
And just one final one on that. When was that conversation? When did that take place? Roughly, what month was it? Do you remember?
Well, the initial conversation was quite shortly after the season ended, so it was fairly early on, and of course it made sense. It made sense for a club if they were, or certainly if the person involved thought they would sell the player to us. It made sense for them to get the business done as early as they possibly could. Is
there any part of you thinking just now, then, the way things have transpired, that Hibs' intention all along was to sell to Celtic?
No. For me, it's a not issue. I think within Hibs they thought about it. Maybe they thought about the fans' reaction of selling to their biggest rival, and quite frankly, I understood the decision not to sell to Rangers more easily than I understood the decision to sell to Rangers.
Dave, just go back to the off-field things. How close are you to getting Rangers listed once more?
We've got the proposals. We had discussions around the whole listing yesterday, and there will be a separate press announcement on that in the next couple of days, I think. So I'd rather leave it for a more structured announcement, because there's a lot of formalities you have to deal with on that. But yeah, we're a lot clearer. The share issue is a separate issue. You get the listing and the share issue. The share issue still has to go through general meetings, etc. The share issue, certainly from my point of view, is not a priority, because the existing shareholders have agreed to fund the club. So whether it's by way of loans or shares, it's not occupying my mind at all.